Hey guys, we're going over part 2 of chapter 22 now. So bring up your notes, that PowerPoint, whatever you are doing to prepare. Okay, so here's where we left off last time. It is slide 53. It might be different on yours. It might be different on the one that I posted. But anyway, we're talking about hormones regulating plant growth now. And from chapter 22, which is angiosperm growth and development. So chemicals called hormones travel between cells and regulate many aspects of plant growth, just like your own growth is regulated by hormones as well. 5 major hormones that we will talk about in this lecture are going to play major roles in plant growth and development. Auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, ethylene, abscisic acid. We're going to talk about each one of these right now. So auxins stimulate fruit development. They're going to promote the growth of fruit, control elongation of cells in a stem, which we'll talk about later with phototropism. This is important. That's going to controlling elongation of cells in a stem. That's how, if you have a plant that's indoors, it is going to move towards light. And that's because on this like bent side, it is elongating the cells on that side so that you can bend towards the light, for instance. Then auxins also suppress the growth of lateral buds. So instead of all of these sort of branches, you're going to, and we'll talk about the difference between these two plants in like a couple of slides, but the difference here and here is that here you have not altered the shoot apical meristem, okay? So in a typical plant, whatever kind of plant this is, auxins are going to dominate in the shoot, and they are going to prefer to grow upwards instead of outwards. Next, cytokinins, they're going to stimulate cell division in many plant parts. They're also going to stimulate this growth of lateral buds. They delay the shedding of leaves as well. Now, cell division in many plant parts, it's typically thought that when you have this normal plant that has not been altered, you have auxin dominating in the shoot and cytokinins dominating in the root, causing that sort of lateral growth of the root systems, causing them to spread out in order to get water. Now, auxins are primarily released from the shoot tip. They grow tall. Cytokinins are primarily released from the roots. That's why you get those branched roots that I just talked about. So meaning that if auxins prefer to grow tall, cytokinins prefer to grow outwards, you have this sort of antagonistic relationship between these two hormones. They're going to like limit each other. That's why one predominates in the shoot, one predominates in the root. Yeah, so auxins are going to sort of inhibit cytokinin wherever you have auxins. So this counteracting effect of these hormones is called apical dominance. Now, what apical dominance means is that if you have this shoot tip in place, the plant will preferentially grow up before it grows out, before it grows like thicker, before it grows more branches. Versus if you remove the shoot tip like you did in this plant, then what's going to happen is that this auxin concentration has been thrown off, cytokinin actually takes over, and that's going to stimulate the outgrowth of what are known as these lateral buds. So from those axillary buds, you remember you saw your node, internode, node, internode, and at every single node you had this like bud of stem cells. Well, cytokinin is working there, and once auxin is like not predominating in the shoot anymore, cytokinin is going to say, hey, axillary bud, hey, lateral buds, you are ready to go. Go ahead and put out leaves. Go ahead and put out more branches, and then the plant is going to become bushier. So apical dominance, if you have the shoot, apical meristem, it will prefer to grow upwards. If you get rid of that shoot apical meristem, it will grow outwards. So where does auxin mainly function? In this shoot apical meristem. Gibberellins are also going to stimulate shoot elongation, and fruit growth. So shoot elongation, you can think of it as stem elongation, and fruit growth. So farmers are actually going to be able to use these hormones in agriculture in order to improve the harvests. Okay, so here you have not added gibberellin. Here you have added gibberellin. So this longer stem as well as increased fruit growth from that plant. Now that was gibberellins. Ethylene is responsible for fruit ripening. So think about, it's responsible for a few other things too. Okay, so fruit ripening also stimulates shedding of leaves, flowers, and fruits. Okay, so fruit ripening, we talked about this in the last video, that fruits are going to be responsible for dispersing seeds. That's the main role of these fruits. So you want to get fruits to the exact right ripeness where it's good to eat, because if you eat it, then you're going to poop out the seeds. You or other organisms are going to poop out the seeds and facilitate the disbursement of the seeds for that plant that you ate. Now, ethylene, you know, it's not only for fruit ripening, stimulates that shedding of leaves, flowers, and fruits. So if you have, like, for instance, a bunch of flowers and they're just sort of wilting, okay, it's because of ethylene. If you have a stalk of bananas, okay, a bunch of bananas, and you see them just getting a little bit browner every single day, it's ethylene. If you have spinach in the fridge and you just see it just getting so nasty, then it's ethylene, okay? All right, so let me see if, so here you have, let me see if we say that. Okay, we do say that there. So ethylene is responsible for all of those things. You can get ethylene absorbers for your fridge or for your bananas or whatever, and it's going to keep your fruits and vegetables fresher longer. I actually have these. Now, like, do they work? Not anymore, because I think you're supposed to change the filter, and I literally never have. But basically, what will happen is that if you, ethylene is going to be released from the site of any sort of tissue damage, okay? So if you have a bunch of bananas and you cover that stem part where it's been broken off, you're going to reduce the amount of ethylene that is causing those bananas to be brown. If you have, I don't know, like an onion or like anything that is starting to turn brown, and you put new, like a new onion in with that other older onion, what's going to happen is that those new onions or new whatever is going to get older more quickly. So you have to separate them, because the ethylene that is being, like, released by those older onions or older bananas or whatever are going to affect the newer ones, okay? So ethylene absorbers can help that. Here you have, okay, so ethylene caused the flowers on the left right here to wither. Flowers on the right are genetically engineered to have mutant ethylene receptor genes. So amazing. In this case, the plant releases ethylene, but the ethylene receptors in the plant have been mutated. It is not sensing that there's ethylene in the environment. So the plant, the flowers are not wilting. There's no difference in these plants. Like, ethylene is being released, it's just not being sensed by these flowers, okay? So you have way longer sort of wilt time. Isn't that incredible? All right, then abscisic acid is going to inhibit shoot growth, maintain seed dormancy, stimulates the closure of stomata, which is like this gas exchange, these guard cells within the plant leaves. It's also how, like, water will be lost through plant leaves. So if you have closure of stomata, you're not going to be losing as much water, and the shedding of plant parts. Well, guess what? All of these are going to be all of these things, okay? Inhibiting shoot growth, so it's not growing very much. Seed dormancy, you're not, like, planting new plants, okay? Stimulates closure of stomata. It's not losing water. It's maintaining all of its nutrients and things. Shedding of plant parts like the leaves. Okay, so do you see much tree growth in the winter? No, you don't. Okay, that's because of abscisic acid. Abscisic acid. All right, guys, clicker question that you would have had in class. Researchers first discovered gibberellins in diseased rice plants. A gibberellin producing fungus infected the plants, causing abnormal growth. Okay, so a fungus that produces gibberellin. So you have increased gibberellin in these rice plants that are infected with this fungus. How do you think the researchers could identify the infected plants in the field? So if you have increased gibberellin, go back in your notes, figure out what gibberellin was for. Were the plants abnormally short? Were the plants abnormally tall? Did the plants shed their leaves? Okay, so there are a few different hormones that are responsible for shedding the leaves, but that's not one for gibberellin. Okay, so for gibberellin, you have the promotion of production of fruits. You also have stem elongation as one of the functions of gibberellin. So you have this longer, think of those grapes, the longer stem, more fruits in when they were treated with gibberellin. So the plants were abnormally tall would be the answer here. Many plants grow towards light. This is a tendency called phototropism, and we're going to talk about the mechanism, how this process occurs right here. Never mind, sorry. Okay, so phototropism is the process whereby plants are going to move towards what's called directional light. So if you have a plant in an open field, full sun, are they going to grow towards the light? No, because they're always going to have direct access to light. Okay, but if you have plants inside your house and only in one direction do they actually receive a substantial amount of light, the plant is going to grow in that direction, just like this. Okay, now the hormone auxin is responsible for this. As auxin molecules migrate away from the light, they accumulate on the shaded side of the stem. So you have directional light, auxin molecules move to the shaded side of this plant, and then they are going to cause water to enter the cells on the shaded side of the stem. So here is cells remaining unchanged on the sunny side of the plant. Auxin migrates over to the shaded side of the plant, causes this cell elongation by having these cells increase the amount of water within those cells, okay? Thereby stimulating those cells to elongate. Okay, so typical cell size, but auxin comes over here. Now we are accommodating more water, getting bigger. If you're only getting bigger on one side, that stem is going to bend in one direction. All right, so light is, all right. It was once thought that light, the amount of sunlight, was the biggest player in flowering time, okay? The main thought was that, okay, if there's more sunlight, plants will flower. That is not the case. In fact, a lot of the times it actually has to do with the amount of night time, and it's different for different plants. Okay, so here you've got a clover in all of these examples, and here you have a chrysanthemum in these examples. Okay, so a clover is a long day or short night plant, whereas a chrysanthemum is a short day and long night plant. So it is going to flower when there are short days and long nights, specifically though, long nights. And we're going to show you the evidence for this. All right, so plants flower when periods of darkness meet certain thresholds. So if you have, so here is the halfway point, right? 12 hours. So let's say that you got 8 hours of night and the rest of the time you had daylight. Okay, well, that's really good for a long day plant like the clover. That's going to mean with the short nighttime, the clover is going to flower. But for a plant that prefers long stretches of night, the chrysanthemum will not flower. Now, if we reverse this and we say, okay, well, how about 8 hours-ish of light and the rest darkness instead? So we have flipped this, we have flipped the amount of day and night. Now, because of this long stretch of nighttime, the clover does not flower and the chrysanthemum does flower. So supporting the evidence that the chrysanthemum likes long stretches of night, clover likes short stretches of night. What happens though if we have this same overall period of nighttime, but halfway through we flash light, just a momentary flash of light? What happens? Okay. In that case, you have this light, and right in the middle, you have a flash of light as your experiment, because that would say the purpose of this was telling, okay, well, what's responsible for flowering? Is it in the chrysanthemum, is it the short day or is it the long night? In this example, the overall amount of darkness and the overall amount of lightness is the same, except in the darkness, you had that flash of light. So if sunlight was responsible for chrysanthemum flowering, this flash of light would not have any sort of effect. Instead, it has an effect on both the clover and the chrysanthemum. You have an opposite reaction to what happened in B. Okay, so you have nighttime, 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 flash of light, nighttime, 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 and then the same amount of light. Because the night was interrupted, you had a short night, and this clover flowered. In what should have been a long night, this chrysanthemum did not flower because of that flash of light. So you had interrupted nights, showing that the periods of darkness are actually most times even more important than periods of light. Okay, isn't that insane? Like, what? This is such a beautiful experiment. I can't even deal with it. That's brilliant. You take the same freaking thing in B and C and you just flash a light, and then you get completely different results. That's showing that it's periods of darkness. What? Okay. All right, so gravity is another important environmental cue. Gravitropism. You have a plant responding to gravity. This is why shoots always grow upwards, roots always grow downwards or laterally, just not upwards. Now, if you have a gravitropism mutant, which actually was studied by in corn by one of my friends in grad school, you can have roots that grow up out of the soil, and you can have shoots that sort of grow downwards, like completely wonky. So gravitropism is a thing because you have these molecules called statoliths that are going to settle at the bottoms of your cell, okay? Settle at the bottoms of your cells. In this case, it's in the roots, and that's going to cue the root to grow in a specific direction. So it might help plants to detect that gravity. Now, if you have a gravitropism mutant, statoliths will not settle at the bottoms of these cells. They'll be randomly distributed. So that's when you get this sort of confused growth that has no directionality. Next, you have a reaction where plants respond to touch, which is called thigmotropism. Now, this is you can have lots of vines that do this, kudzu does this, and it is a way where at the lateral, this like axillary bud that we have talked about in the nook of the leaf, instead of producing a new stem or a branch or a leaf or a flower, it produces these little tendrils, okay? And these tendrils, they are going to just move out like little fingers searching for something to grab onto. When it grabs on to a neighboring plant, for instance, it is going to coil like this. It just coils and coils and coils, bringing the body of this plant closer to this plant. And then what it'll do, it'll loosen its grip here, climb the plant, and go even further up. So it basically hoists this plant. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to take the body of this plant and like change its direction? Why would you want to do that? For access to sunlight. Okay, for access to sunlight, because if you're able to compete with this plant right here, you're going to have a bigger plant, you're going to have a healthier plant. Okay, thigmotropism, I just gave you the answer to this question. Allows climbing plants to wrap tendrils around a supportive structure like a trellis, like another plant. This adaptation improves the plant's ability to what? Absorb their food through their roots. Tendrils don't have anything to do with that. Absorb oxygen does not have anything to do with that. The leaves are intact. Acquire light, absorb water. C, acquire light. Okay, guys, that was it. That's it for chapter 22. So you have 3 videos, 1 for chapter 21, 2 for chapter 22, all about plant form and function, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, so remember, what should I tell you? Exam 2 is covering 3 chapters, 14, 21, and 22. And yeah, you've got more information under the YouTube video on our channel. You have a great day.